we're constantly asking, has the Democratic Party learned its lesson? Has the Democratic Party learned its lesson? Has the Democratic Party learned its lesson after Trump's victory? And constantly the answer seems to be, nope, not really. They still want to do the same old, take corporate money, run towards the center, run away from progressive policy goals that poll well over 50%. This seemed to be exemplified by Nancy Pelosi's frightened / dismissive reaction to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's amazing victory. Please check out our coverage from that night. It was really a special evening. But here's what the House Minority Leader had to say about it.
We have an array of genders, generations, geography, and the rest, opinion in our caucus, and we're very proud of that. The fact that in a very progressive district in New York, it went more progressive than, well, Joe Crowley is a progressive, but more to the left than Joe Crowley, is about that district. It is not to be viewed as something that stands for everything else.
Okay, Joe Crowley is a progressive, sure. But you're saying, Nancy Pelosi, that it doesn't mean anything that one of the most senior, powerful members of the House, with a 10-to-1 fundraising advantage with corporate money, who was called the King of Queens due to his vast political influence, lost to a 28-year-old Bernie-crat on a Democratic Socialist platform. You're going to chalk that up to the blueness and progressivism of the district? Well, that was a factor. Of course it was. But it was just that, a factor. But it would behoove you to acknowledge the other factors, because then maybe you could learn something from them. But as we know, they aren't great learners when it comes to standing up to their corporate donors, obviously. However, there is a glimmer of hope. A glimmer of hope beyond Alex's unbelievable emotional victory on Tuesday night. And that hope is Representative Barbara Lee of California. Barbara Lee is one of the most progressive, principled representatives in the country and has been standing up for progressive values and challenging the military-industrial complex for nearly 20 years. And she could become one of the most powerful Democrats in the House now that Crowley has been ousted, Dave Weigel of the Washington Post reports. Representative Barbara Lee of California has begun talking to fellow Democrats about running for party conference chair, the leadership role held by Representative Joe Crowley of New York. "I was not seriously considering this until Tuesday night," Lee said. "If this were not an open seat, I'd be making a different calculation. But things move fast around here, and I didn't want to wait until November to start looking at this." Lee, who like Crowley was first elected in 1998, has often been at the far left of the congressional party. Famously, she was the only member of Congress to vote against authorization of military force after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. The 72-year-old Lee ran for vice chair of the Democratic Conference, losing by 1 vote to Representative Linda T. Sanchez, also of California. In that campaign, said Lee, she attracted the support of some conservative Democrats who broke with her on policy, but knew I don't demonize people if they don't agree with me, and because she had a portfolio that included foreign policy. Ocasio-Cortez told the Washington Post last week that she, too, would not commit to supporting Nancy Pelosi if Democrats won control of the House and Pelosi was seeking to become Speaker. "Is Barbara Lee available?" Ocasio-Cortez asked. Okay, so a lot to unpack here. Love the ambition from Alexandria there, but let's be real here. Barbara Lee is not going to challenge another Bay Area Democrat for Speaker, especially when Pelosi was pretty handily beat by Representative Tim Ryan when he tried to challenge her. And Lee is way more progressive than Tim Ryan, so that might be even tougher. But remember, Joe Crowley was in line to replace Nancy Pelosi as the chair of the Democratic Conference. So that could mean that if Barbara Lee replaces Crowley in the Democratic Conference chair position, that she's next in line to replace Pelosi. And that would be a big deal, a huge deal, because Barbara Lee is a true progressive. She was a Black Panther back in the day. She's been incredibly active on climate change and environmental racism, and she supports Medicare for all, yes, and a variety of other progressive policy proposals. But she is really progressive on an issue that even other progressives have had a hard time being firm on, and that is the issue of war. On June 29, 2017, Representative Barbara Lee won nearly unanimous support on the Appropriations Committee for her measure to sunset the post-9/11 authorization for the use of military force, or AUMF, essentially a blank check for American wars. Lee's success also comes as a vindication. She was the only member of Congress to vote against the AUMF, 420 to 1. September 11th changed the world, she said at the time. Our deepest fears now haunt us. Yet I am convinced that military action will not prevent further acts of international terrorism against the United States. To date, the passage of that resolution has left more than 100,000 dead in Afghanistan, including more than 30,000 civilians and over 2,000 U.S. soldiers. Since 2001, the AUMF has been used to justify at least 37 military actions in at least 16 countries, including ongoing campaigns in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Libya, Niger, and Yemen. And Barbara Lee was the one person who voted against the AUMF in the House. Just the one. Even Bernie Sanders voted for the AUMF. And to be fair to Bernie, the 2001 AUMF didn't explicitly give the executive branch as many powers as they now have, but still, being that one voice in the post-9/11 political climate where everyone was so understandably raw and emotional, being that one voice to say, no, we shouldn't extend these absolute powers of war to the president. This sets a dangerous precedent. We shouldn't do that. Being that one voice took a lot of courage. A lot of courage. And can you imagine if the leaders of the Democrats in the House had that courage? Can you imagine if she was the person leading this party in the lower chamber? The Democrats would be a hell of a lot more brave, in my opinion. I think that's for sure. The Democratic Party could win a lot more elections if they had a fraction of Barbara Lee's courage. So now, I'm not saying she's going to get this position. The Democrats in the House could completely sabotage her chances and undercut her, but she definitely has the respect of the other members of that caucus. And if any truly progressive representative can take over Crowley's position there and set themselves up to take over Pelosi's job, it's Barbara Lee. Because even the congressmen and women that are so mired in Washington corruption understand that Barbara Lee is a truly brave person and she deserves the utmost respect. So run, Barbara, run.